Welcome to Hubspoke Tales, where we look for the truth and the lies of local folklore. Since the beginning of time, people have often looked for scapegoats onto which they could heap their guilt and negativity. Of course, in a world where we have a just, loving, and all-forgiving God, his opposite would be the devil, an entity who would become a scapegoat for many. Even today, people are quick to jump to the devil made him do it, or the devil's inside that girl. However, the truth is much more horrifying than that. Sometimes humans are just evil all on their own. That fact may bring joy to the devil, but his joy comes from knowing he didn't have anything to do with it. Approximately 20,000 murders are committed each year in the United States. There is no exact statistic on how many of those are blamed on Satan, but as of podcast date, no murder has ever been traced to the Church of Satan or Satan worship by an individual. Several murderers have given credit to the devil for their deeds. Son of Sam murderer David Berkowitz, Cody Lott, Sean Sellers, and Louis Zambrano have all tried, but killing for the Dark One is not a valid murder defense, so often they are just labeled insane. These murderers deny personal responsibility due to demonic possession or just following Satan's orders, thus using Satan as the ultimate scapegoat. But Dr. David Ley with Psychology Today disagrees. When researching the Satan-worshipping craze of the 1990s, he found that many people associated with this type of worship were either unable to tell fantasy from reality, thus having a diagnosable ailment, or were just misunderstood or misjudged like children who liked Dungeons and Dragons. Ley said, in the 1990s, 8% of the American population was alleged to be secret Satanists, and countless crimes, murders, and suicides were blamed on the insidious influence of secret Satan worshipping. Wild claims proliferated that some games contained secret instructions on hacking, which actually led to the U.S. Secret Service conducting a raid on one game manufacturer, and the Dungeons and Dragons books were printed using ink containing secret Soviet mind control chemicals. Around the United States, the recovered memory movement boomed, and charges of child abuse and secret satanic rituals were believed to occur in every neighborhood and city. The recovered memory movement and panic over satanic ritual abuse led to parents and daycare workers going to jail, as the mental health industry unquestioningly, for the most part, joined forces to protect young people, right wrongs, and punish wrongdoers. American society would see the effects of the Satan panic in everything from lipstick and nail polish color to children's games, religion, popular music, and crimes. Movies like The Omen, The Exorcist, Midsummer, and the thought-provoking 2023 film Nefarious show what can happen when the real devil wins. Whether the devil is to blame for the sins people do, or if he just takes great happiness from it, the bad in this world is done by humans to humans. But so is the good. The short story, The Buccaneer Times Murder Beat, explores the horrors of one man in particular. Rodney Way Lancaster's grandfather could have saved Buccaneer County $1,500 had them idiots listened to him before going out of state to hire a highfalutin specialist. He knew his grandson was an evil SOB from birth. Well, actually, from the time Rodney was big enough to ball up a fist. His middle name was an indicator that Rodney got his way in most matters, even as an infant. First, the pudgy monster hit his own mama in the face and laughed like it was the funniest thing since Scooby-Doo. He turned his malicious intent towards anything four-legged as he himself learned to crawl. At the trial, the $1,500 specialist said that Rodney exhibited signs of antisocial personality disorder because of his history of breaking the law, showing no remorse for his crimes, and acting out violently. Papa Lancaster just shook his head in disgust. Every adult, child, and animal in a 30-mile radius hated Rodney as well as feared him. More than once, and with great conviction, the quote, "He will be killed somebody someday," was uttered quietly in small groups throughout town. So when the local sheriff's department responded to a welfare check at the home of a young family out on Booger Bridge Road, people were shocked by the horror of the crimes that occurred there, but not by the number one suspect. Apparently, David Bradley and his pretty wife Debbie had the unfortunate chance of meeting Rodney at the local dive bar a couple of weekends before the crime. Peggy's Dart Bar and Music Emporium had its hard liquor license revoked long ago, but maintained business by selling beer and allowing illegal gambling in the pool room. Witnesses would later say, other than Rodney's normal cocky behavior, including boasting about his manhood and verbally threatening various men with physical confrontation, it didn't look to them like the Bradleys had done anything to warrant the nightmare that was found in their home by two deputies, one of which would ultimately leave the force after having a nervous breakdown from what he witnessed in the crib of that house. Mr. Bradley was found face down in the couple's bedroom. Most of his face was found in the master bath, where the shotgun blast sent it the night before. Mrs. Bradley fared slightly better, if you can call it that. She was found intact in the hall where Rodney drug her by her hair. She was beaten to death by the butt of the shotgun. Their newborn baby was found in the crib. The coroner confirmed that both deputies had surmised. Years of arresting drunken idiots caught fist-fighting in the parking lot of Peggy's had concreted images of bruises and scrapes in their minds. The baby had been beaten to death by what looked like at least 7 different blows. EMTs had to give the deputies oxygen when they arrived. Rodney was linked to the crime when he was caught only one county over trying to sell property stolen from the Bradley house. This time, there would be no threatening witnesses. Rodney was going to jail. He didn't care. 3 squares and cable television was the same to him, inside or out. It angered him greatly that this was the one crime that they would catch him for, that he'd have to go down for, but they knew little about the others, if at all. He hurt who he wanted to hurt when he wanted, and took great pride in knowing there were at least a couple of bodies that would never be found. The death sentence was not a shock, but just to stick it to the law enforcement, he appealed several times until 11 years crawled by. Prison was just another place for Rodney to bully and torture. This time, however, the compassion for his victims looked a little different. Finally, in 2011, Rodney's time was up. He made a scene by burning his only possessions before being moved to the death row room, and enraged the prison guards with an elaborate last meal request. Medium rare filet mignon with French beef glaze, marinated button mushrooms, mashed potatoes with real cream, homemade white bread, and chocolate silk pie with steaming hot coffee was reported by the Buccaneer Times. He knew that he'd never live long enough to enjoy the pie or the coffee, but smirked evilly to himself that the request alone irritated the guards. Rodney was deathly allergic to mushrooms. His mother hated them when he was a child, so he never ate them until alone one night at a Pizza Hut outside of Atlanta, where he woke up in the back of an ambulance with an EpiPen poking out of his thigh. This secret would put him in a place to screw over law enforcement. His last F.U. to the man before exiting this world for the great black nothingness he so believed waited for him. A priest, a Baptist preacher his papa had requested visit, and the warden stood outside the death row cell as he tore the plastic fork from its package. "Real classy there, warden," chastised Rodney. "Fancy meal and plastic forks." The warden said nothing. Rodney ate the steak slowly and noticed a scratchy tickle in the back of his throat. The beef glaze and mushrooms had met and mixed on the plate, and although the coughing started shortly thereafter, Rodney was able to eat several of the mushrooms before the witnesses set off an alarm. Rodney's last thoughts included FUs to the clergy and warden and to life in general, a life he thought himself too good for. Choking to death was a painful way to die, but he could handle it, and anyway, if it was fairly quick, goodbye, world. The media was contacted shortly after the witnesses already gathered at the execution room were told. Never in Georgia's execution history had something like this happened. The coroner received the body just about sunrise the following morning. The on-site prison doctor had confirmed anaphylaxis as the cause of death. However, the internal body temperature seemed high when B.J. Thornton punched the thermometer through the abdomen and into the liver for a more precise reading. Something wasn't right. At about that same time, Rodney Way Lancaster regained a waning sense of consciousness. He felt cold and his throat itched slightly. Funny, he thought, hell is supposed to be hot. All the Bible thumpers at his papa's church had said so. Paralyzed and not quite yet with it all of his wits, Rodney felt an even colder piece of metal slide across his belly, while his pants were yanked slightly downwards. He started to say that he wasn't that kind of guy about the time a sharp burning stabbed him, and even though his body had said flinch, all he could do was curl up into his head as the reality of his location, and worse, his situation, came into clear thinking. Something wasn't right. Rodney heard B.J. Thornton ask his assistant to please run outside and double-check with the driver that they received all of the paperwork before he got out of the driveway. Rodney struggled to move or talk, but remained imprisoned behind slightly trembling eyes, when close to his ear an educated Southern accent whispered, "I think you're still there. I also think that you and I are going to have some fun, you evil S.O.B. Rodney, who had never been scared a day in his life, tasted the bile of a jolted man, one pushed into a realm of panic and realization. He thought he was the only one of his kind, the kind that drew great pleasure from the suffering of others. But he thought wrong. Somewhere between the Y incision and the cracking of his chest plate, Rodney found the hell he thought he longed for, and it welcomed him with open arms. The truth about Hattiesburg is we have a treasure at Camp Shelby. The Mississippi Armed Forces Museum amplifies the whispers of our unsung heroes of past wars and current service. Open to the public 5 days a week, make plans to visit this remarkable place. And if you enjoyed this episode of Hubspoke Tales with Gina, join me next time as we explore religion and talk about the new Pope.